Welcome back to One Comic Book a Day, where I've got my mind back after yesterday's story. Today we are covering Superboy issue 11 and the final story, The Famous First Crimes, which I keep forgetting the famous part of that title. This is the fifth Humpty Dumpty story, fifth in a row if we're counting Superboy stories, if we're ignoring all the adventure comics I'm dealing with in between those. And if you've been watching this, you know my complaint about Humpty Dumpty is I think he's a good villain. I think he's a good villain for the Golden Age. Later, maybe in Silver Age, he's probably not that great of a villain, but he really works here. But very quickly, his stories just became repetitive. They're the same thing over and over again. He's obsessed with some sort of collection, toy collection maybe. He uses said collection to steal more to add to said collection, though sometimes it feels like he's losing a piece of that collection to add a piece to that collection. It's kind of confusing. Maybe not confusing, just visually not helpful. Like, why would you be stealing something else and ruining something? We've already covered this in the other stories. Only for Superboy to eventually follow him back to his hideout, which is a different hideout but looks exactly the same, and screw with him until he realizes Superboy is doing it and gives up. That's the last four Humpty Dumpty stories. And this isn't exactly that, but it's also that sped up. We're speed running it. For the first half of the story, it is more of a classic Humpty Dumpty story. Superboy is collecting artifacts for the first museum in Smallville, and if you're like me, you're immediately like, wait, we've been to multiple museums in Smallville. It's kind of a problem. It's a small town America, and they have multiple museums, including a Greek museum. It just seems like maybe they shouldn't be spending so much money on museums. Maybe help the small farmers live. Instead of all these museums, though I do respect their love of history. But no, here we get our first museum. Maybe this takes place before the other museums, and Superboy is responsible for those museums' constructions. And I was worried that Superboy was going to go over to other cultures and steal their stuff. Superman's done that before. Here he's just kind of finding lost artifacts in the dirt. Nothing 100% sacred. He is finding like lost indigenous weapons along with American weapons from wars. I don't know if anyone's going to be all that precious about that, as opposed to him like robbing a grave site of some sort or burial ground. Humpty gets involved with his own collection of firsts for Superboy, only for him to be outsmarted by Superboy and Superboy to take him out. Now, here's actually an interesting part of that story, as he does find his hideout, though it doesn't look like the hideout from before. We don't actually get a good look at it, so I can't 100% make that claim. He does seem to have henchmen, though, which is unusual for him. And Superboy basically takes this whole collection and uses it for the museum. I actually like that idea. Here's the thing. This is halfway through the story, and the main thrust, our entire story, Humpty Dumpty using his first collection against Superboy and the museum, are both dealt with halfway through the story. So what is this story about? Well, we sped through a normal Humpty Dumpty story, and now we're going to get a little more experimental. I guess by speeding through a Humpty Dumpty story, we are actually already being experimental. But hey, it's something different, and Humpty Dumpty sort of escapes his imprisonment with having to show off his collection. I'm not exactly sure what was happening here. Forced labor? Superboy. Not a great look for you. Instead, now he's really obsessed with finding out who Superboy is, which is not a very exciting Superboy story. We've seen this type of story over and over again. In fact, Lana tried to do this earlier in the goddamn comic. Same issue. That was story 1, but it's different for him, so I guess can't completely throw the baby out with the bathwater here, but it's not different enough. I do respect that we are trying something. And he goes after Clark, because Clark was the first person Superboy ever saved, which honestly, Ma Kent shouldn't have let this get into the newspaper, because it definitely draws some suspicion towards him. And the climax is essentially Clark having to figure out a way to both exist as Clark as the hostage and be Superboy saving Clark. It's fine. It'd probably work better if I haven't seen this a lot. So it's a normal Humpty story for the first half, and then a normal Superboy story for the second half, just with Humpty Dumpty. I think, as you might have noticed, the major issue is it feels like two separate Humpty Dumpty stories. They maybe should have just done the full museum story and then done a full version of Humpty Dumpty trying to prove who Superboy is. As it is, they're not complete stories. They feel rushed. And it does legitimately feel like you transition into a completely different story when you get to like page 6 or 7. Okay, that is it from Superboy issue 11. The famous first crimes. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notifications when a new video is up. I do this Monday through Friday, but Friday is a Bat Friday. I cover a Batman story in either Detective Comics or Batman, and until next time, let's ponder the question, whatever did happen to the boy of tomorrow? And if we get all of Humpty's collections, we can really have a museum. What if all museums, even the Greek one, are just Humpty Dumpty collections? Okay, have a great day.